If you're very, very stressed, it feels as if the state that you're in will go on forever.
In this remarkable video, Dr. Andrew Huberman imparts a profound truth. We can control our minds, even in the face of stress and narrow thinking. It's a reminder that our innate power lies within, waiting to be tapped into and harnessed. Through self-awareness and intentional practice, we can navigate life's challenges and make choices that align with our deepest desires. Dr. Huberman's words serve as a powerful catalyst, urging us to explore our untapped potential and embrace the transformative ability to shape our paths.
If you can't control the mind with the mind, look to the body to control the mind.
Dr. Huberman's enlightening exploration into the amygdala and other limbic structures shed invaluable light on the intricate interplay between our emotions and our mind's ability to exert control. By unraveling the neural mechanisms at play, we gain a deeper understanding of our own personal growth and emotional well-being. This knowledge empowers us to reshape our responses to stress, redirect our thoughts, and ultimately cultivate a more empowered and fulfilling life.
If we are in a pretty relaxed state, or if we are happy, we generally feel like we can do what we want to do. We can maneuver through our environment. We can make choices that are reasonable. But oftentimes we're not in relaxed and happy states. That's just part of the human experience, obviously. And there's a fundamental feature to the nervous system, which is this thing they call the autonomic nervous system, which is just fancy nerd speak for the components of your nervous system that raise your levels of alertness or bring them way down. Sometimes we hear fight or flight, rest and digest, but this system governs all that, but a lot more. And basically what happens is when we are at the extremes of the autonomic, what I call seesaw, of very, very alert to the point of being really stressed or panicked or concerned, or if we are very close to sleep and we're drowsy and we're exhausted, at those points along the autonomic nervous system, our thoughts become a bit like a runaway train. You know, if you're very upset, it's hard to talk yourself out of it. If you're stressed, it's hard to think yourself out of it. In fact, you can start doing all sorts of third personing and rationalization. You can call someone, you can text somebody. It's very hard to get yourself out of those states with thinking alone. But the beauty of the autonomic nervous system is that it traverses the brain and the body, and it connects to essentially all the organs of the body. And it's a two-way street such that certain behaviors, even certain patterns of breathing, allow us to shift where we are on the autonomic continuum between very, very alert and stressed and very calm, and thereby give our mind a shift also in terms of the kinds of thoughts that we can entertain, the sorts of actions that we can engage in. To make this concrete, if you're very, very stressed, you're very, very upset, two things happen. One, it's very hard to take your focus off whatever it is that's upsetting you. And if you don't know what's upsetting you, pure anxiety, but you don't know why, it's very hard to take your mind off of the feelings of anxiety. In those states of mind, there's another component, which is that for whatever reason, and no one really understands why this is, it feels as if the state that you're in will go on forever. Now, when we're in happy, relaxed states, rarely do we think, gosh, this is going to go on forever. And yet when we are in these unfortunate states of mind, we get the idea somehow, it sort of hijacks our perception of time, and we feel like this is never going to stop. If we turn to the body and certain behaviors, we are able to move ourselves along the autonomic continuum. And at that point, when we've done that successfully, and it's actually quite straightforward to do, we are able to think about things differently. We start to get a sense that the way we feel might not be the way we're going to feel forever. And it's in those shifts that we start to realize, my mind actually is not my best friend at these extremes, but there's a lot more to it. You're only getting the tip of the iceberg in those states. So that's why I say, if you can't control the mind with the mind, look to the body to control the mind.
In this captivating conversation, Dr. Andrew Huberman takes a deep dive into the intricate realm of attachment styles and limbic resonance. With a profound understanding of how our early relationships shape our adult lives, Dr. Huberman offers a beacon of hope. He reminds us that we possess the incredible power to rewrite our attachment scripts, paving the way for healthier and more fulfilling connections.
Let's take stress as an example, and this could be stress, panic, anxiety. Each one of those has a definition in medical terms, psychological terms, but to be fair, no one really knows how to draw the line in the brain between fear and stress and anxiety. But we can say with certainty that all of those states involve high levels of alertness, high levels of awareness, sometimes for things in our environment and sometimes just for what's going on internally. When we are stressed, anxious, afraid, waking up in the middle of the night, doesn't matter what triggered it, there are a couple basic things that happen to all of us. First of all, our heart rate quickens. That's kind of an obvious one. Fuel from our muscles and our liver is shuttled to particular organs of the body and away from others. In particular, fuel is shuttled towards the big muscles of the body to generate large movements. This is why we quake a bit when we're stressed. The hands will shake. It's preparing us we are prepared for movement.
Dr. Huberman's wisdom extends far beyond scientific insights. He brings our attention to the fundamental importance of holistic well-being. Through his words, we are reminded of the essential role that natural light exposure, exercise, and a nourishing diet play in supporting our physical and mental states. It is a gentle yet powerful reminder that taking care of our bodies is integral to mastering our minds. By prioritizing our physical well-being, we lay a sort of solid foundation for mental resilience, vitality, and a harmonious balance in our lives.
The shaking actually is the consequence of trying to not move when we are stressed. Basically, this is why taking a walk or a run, you actually feel like you can kind of dispel the stress. You're not actually dispelling the stress. What's happened is it's like the RPM are getting cranked up. It's like you could sit there in a parked car and do that, but basically you take the thing out of park and it just wants to go. And so a lot of the times when we're stressed, it's in conditions in which we're trying to remain still. Public speaking, in a tough argument, at the doctor's office about to get an injection. It depends on what stresses people, obviously. But that readiness for action is a second component. So heart rate, readiness for action by way of shuttling glucose and other fuels to the muscles, and then away from the reproductive organs, from digestive organs, et cetera, because that is just not the right time for that. Another very, very powerful feature of this response is that our pupils of our eyes, the dark parts of our eyes, get big. Now, you might think that that expands your visual field, but actually the way the optics of the eye work, that narrows the aperture of your visual field. So when you are stressed, you literally are seeing things through a small aperture, soda straw view of the world, as they say. And under those conditions, you cannot see things in your periphery as well as you could prior to being stressed, but you become exquisitely good at measuring small detailed changes in whatever it is that you happen to be looking at. Now, there's an internal process too, which is that the aperture on your thinking also becomes very, very narrow. So that if, for instance, I had this happen the other day, I heard something very stressful. I couldn't think about anything else, right? And that might just seem logical. Like, of course you can't think about anything else. It's very stressful. You're concerned about this. But my mind wasn't thinking about this particular incident. It was thinking, if this, then this, then if that, then that, and that, then that. And so you start, dropping into the future. You start dropping into the past, like, God, why did we do that? Why, and you start doing all that kind of cycling through things. And of course, there are so many things that can help relax us. Meditation, exercise, a nice healthy meal, social connection. But the fifth column of the stress response is that your aperture of vision, your aperture of thinking gets very narrow, and it becomes harder and harder to do the very things that would keep you out of stress. And so this is kind of the double-edged sword that is stress. And so all the more reason why in those moments, if the stress is not desired, because there are moments when stress is desired, you're navigating an emergency, et cetera. But if you don't want to be in that narrow aperture of thinking and vision, et cetera, then you need to find some way to bring your level of autonomic arousal, as it's called, down slightly so that you can start thinking about other possibilities. Or, there are instances, I think everyone's been in this kind of situation, where the thing that's stressing you out is not going to get resolved today and you need to sleep. And of course, you need to sleep, and then you can't sleep. And then of course that creates a compounding stress. And now you're stressed about not being able to sleep. And then over the course of the next few days, you dissolve into a puddle of tears. But fortunately, there are ways out of that kind of self-destruction.
This video is just the beginning of a journey towards unlocking our full potential. Dr. Huberman's insight inspires us to explore the untapped capabilities of our minds and our bodies. It is a call to action, urging us to embrace relaxation techniques, emotional regulation, and mindful living practices. The path to self-mastery may not be easy, but with each step forward, we empower ourselves to create the life that we really want, a life of balance, growth, and inner fulfillment.
I like to think everybody harbors it inside themselves. I can say, without going into the whole backstory, because I've done it before, I mean, at 19, I basically just looked at myself and decided that I was a loser, right? I mean, I was able-bodied, which was helpful. I had a mind that could remember things, which was helpful. I was interested in a few things, but none of those things were setting me up for career or ongoing progress. And I had a lot of maladaptive behaviors, right? At the time, I was getting involved in fighting. I wasn't completing my schoolwork. I was just really in a bad place. And it was really fear and desperation, mostly fear, that inspired the switch. Along the way, I haven't talked about this publicly, to any great extent, but along the way, I hit numerous roadblocks again and again. Sometimes they were situational, like people close to me dying and the grief that came with that. Sometimes it was my own kind of feeling like I was getting pulled back toward a state of mind that wasn't healthy for me, and so on. But I think what I've been good at least good at, not great at, but at least good at, is finding really good mentors that would allow me to get to the next node, the next milestone. And I should say that some of those mentors were real people that I didn't say, can you be my mentor? Not that that would be a bad thing, but really tried to model my behavior after people that I respected. And sometimes those mentors were people that I didn't know at all. I mean, I'll just say this right now. I'm going to embarrass him by saying it, but I was a junior professor, meaning before I got tenure, running a lab. I had a bulldog puppy, a laboratory, and a home for the first time in my life, and feeling very, very overwhelmed and distraught. And I made many of the things that I heard Tim Ferriss say sort of central to my way of doing things. I didn't go 4 hours of work a week, but I did start to get extreme about organizing my schedule. Like, there were no organizational forces in my life for me at that time that could help me navigate through this landscape of, I'd never been a professor before. I had taught it. Now, this was many years ago now, but I knew how to do science. I felt confident in my ability to take an empty room and a budget and buy the right equipment and do the experiments, hire the people. I had no problem with that. But how to regulate my time and my energy, and how to communicate with people. Instead of asking people, like, what's up when they come in your office, asking them, what specifically, what can I do for you? Like, what do you need? Right? Really cutting to the chase, because time became a valuable resource. Little things like that, tiny things on the surface that translate into huge conversion in terms of time and energy. And I think that's helped me along the way. And then the other thing is, I have really tried to adopt this idea that when it's inevitable, and it will inevitably arrive, that stress grows us, that it really sharpens decision making. It really sharpens decision making. And if you have a very stressful event and then you recover from it, the worst thing to do is just go and keep going. You need to take some time and reflect about what led into that. So I think I'm very good at leveraging fear into positive change. If I really think about most of the major shifts in my life, I'm scared as hell to remain in this situation, and I'm very good at broadcasting fear into my future. If I've ever been in a bad relationship, it was clearly, if I stayed in, it couldn't have been so bad that I felt like I had to leave. So I would broadcast and project, how horrible it would be for my future children. And I might even build that up a little bit in my system. Now, one could say, well, maybe you could have navigated it successfully. I'm better at projecting fear into my future. And that has led me to make, I think, better and better decisions over time. Many people do not need testosterone replacement. Young guys should really avoid doing anabolic steroids. It can really mess up their system, not just physically, not just for the ability to have kids later, but lead to all sorts of sexual issues and sexual performance issues.
Testosterone, a vital hormone produced in the intimate parts of men and women, wink wink, exerts significant influence over several essential bodily functions. Plays a critical role in regulating intimate drive, promoting muscle mass development, maintaining bone density, and influencing mood. In men, testosterone is responsible for developing secondary sexual characteristics and sperm production, while in women it contributes to overall well-being and reproductive health. The balanced production and regulation of testosterone is essential for both genders' optimal physical and emotional health. Understanding the multifaceted role of testosterone can help us appreciate its significance in supporting various aspects of our overall well-being.
If testosterone is very high and estrogen is very low, libido can really suffer.
As we age, testosterone levels naturally decline, but they can also be influenced by various factors like stress, obesity, certain medications. However, there are strategies to naturally boost testosterone levels. Regular exercise, including resistance training and high-intensity workouts, has been shown to have a really positive impact. Prioritizing adequate sleep is crucial, as testosterone production is optimized during restful periods. A healthy diet that includes essential nutrients like zinc, vitamin D, healthy fats, these can all support testosterone production. By adopting these lifestyle choices, individuals can take proactive steps to maintain healthy testosterone levels and support their overall well-being.
People that take anabolic steroids, unless they do things to offset the effect on their own testosterone and sperm production, sperm counts are down, so the probability of successful insemination of the egg is reduced also. It's a numbers game.
In addition to lifestyle changes, some individuals may consider testosterone supplementation to address low testosterone levels. Testosterone supplementation should only be undertaken under medical supervision to ensure appropriate dosage and monitoring. It's important to note that low testosterone can manifest in various symptoms, like fatigue, decreased intimate drive, difficulty concentrating. While testosterone supplementation may address some of these symptoms, exploring the underlying causes and potential alternatives is essential. This video provides a glimpse into the tip of the iceberg.
I just recently came back from Copenhagen. I was there to give a talk for the Lundbeck Foundation, and there was another talk that the Lundbeck Foundation put on. They do a great popular science series. Earlier that week, there was a talk by Dr. Shana Swan. She wrote a book called Countdown. She went on Joe Rogan's podcast, I believe earlier last year, and she talked about the decline of sperm counts from the 1930s until now, and ties it in she's a serious researcher with National Institutes of Health grants, et cetera, ties this to the increasing presence of phthalates that are present mainly in pesticides. If you look at sperm counts and testosterone levels in males in different areas of the United States, they are significantly lower in areas where there's a lot of pesticide use, in rural areas where there's a lot of farming and pesticides. Very serious issue. And in the offspring of mothers that ingest phthalates, there's the anogenital distance, literally the distance between the base of the scrotum and the anus in males is much greater than it is in females.
There's a word for that.
Females don't have a scrotum, obviously, so they measure from the base of the genitals to the base of the vagina to the anus. In males, they go from the base of the scrotum. Depends on the study. Sometimes it's the top of the scrotum. I always say, you always have to be careful when people are measuring anything related to genitalia, because somebody's going to cheat in the measurement. So in any event, I don't know how they controlled for that, but she shows these remarkable pictures in mice and in humans of people that are exposed, or mice that are exposed to phthalates, and basically males are showing the more female-like pattern of anogenital distance when they're exposed to these phthalates in utero. Okay, this is not post-birth. This is in utero. The mother's being exposed. It crosses the blood-placental barrier. What's happening? Well, this is reducing sperm counts. Now, what can people do about this? Well, first of all, there's this question of whether or not phthalates are having a similar effect after a child is brought into the world. One doesn't know, but we do know, and goes back to my early graduate work, was on the effects of androgens like testosterone and DHT on different traits of brain and body. We know that, for instance, just very briefly, that during pregnancy, the brain is organized male by way of, believe it or not, testosterone converted to estrogen through a process called aromatization. But the growth of the penis, the fact that there even will be a penis, et cetera, is set by a testosterone called DHT, dihydrotestosterone. Testosterone converted to DHT through 5-alpha reductase and on. That's an organizing effect on the system, as they call it. But then there's an activating effect where during puberty, the testes just start producing testosterone. Some is converted to DHT, and the DHT is what creates the growth of the penis. Okay? In people that ingest phthalates during puberty and in the post-puberty years, it's conceivable that those phthalates could inhibit the activating effects of androgens, not just what we call the organizing effects of androgens early in life. Okay, why is this interesting and important? Well, sperm counts are definitely going down. Are they going down so much so that people are incapable of reproducing? Probably not, because, as they told us in school, it just takes one, and indeed it just takes one sperm, but it is a probability. It's a numbers game, right? The reason, people that take anabolic steroids, unless they do things to offset the effect on their own testosterone and sperm production, sperm counts are down, so the probability of successful insemination of the egg is reduced also. It's a numbers game. So it just takes one, but having many improves the probability that the one will be able to fertilize. So the short answer is yes, I think it is very concerning. Now, which things should we be concerned about? My understanding of the literature, and here I'm now venturing into territory for which I am certainly not an expert, is that things like plastics that have BPAs may be a concern. Drinking water may be a concern, but the most serious or enriched source of BPAs are things like printed receipts.
The decline of testosterone levels with age is a variable process, differing from person to person. While some individuals may not experience any noticeable symptoms, others may encounter significant symptoms associated with low testosterone. However, it's really important to note that the symptoms of low testosterone can overlap with those other conditions. Therefore, seeking a proper diagnosis from a doctor is crucial to accurately identify the underlying cause of the symptoms. A healthcare professional can conduct comprehensive evaluations, including medical history review, physical examinations, and potentially hormone level testing, to determine if low testosterone or another condition is responsible for the symptoms. After watching this video, you're going to be a master at understanding those testosterone dips.
Printed receipts are a rich source of BPAs.
And topically, that could come through the skin?
Yeah, it could go transdermally. I mean, now, you'd probably have to handle a lot of receipts. Definitely check out cashiers. And listen, it's going to vary. Some people are operating with a testosterone level and sperm count that's already back on its heels, so to speak. Some people have abundant testosterone and sperm. So it is really going to depend on the individual. I don't think people should get paranoid or delusional about any of this. There are also some other things like, do a little bit of online research about phthalates and don't go to fringe sites. Go to Dr. Shana Swan's website, right? I believe she's at Mount Sinai or one of the other larger medical schools in New York. Go to her website. She's a legitimate researcher and see what's there. See what the sources of phthalates are. Pesticides. Does that mean you should only eat organic fruits and vegetables? Maybe. I don't know which pesticides people are using on which fruits and vegetables, right? So there's some research that needs to be done. But the moment we start talking this way and people start saying, oh, wow, this is really like hippie science. This isn't hippie science. This is serious NIH-funded researcher saying phthalates before birth can dramatically alter the trajectory of the male's ability to make sperm and testosterone. Phthalates in puberty may be able to do that, but we know that androgens, in particular DHT and testosterone converted to estrogen, have a powerful role in masculinizing the brain and body during those years. Why wouldn't people do half an hour of research online? Or, for instance, the abundant data that melatonin suppresses puberty, and yet people take melatonin like it was,
insane
super
physiological levels.
Yeah. Am I saying melatonin is going to suppress your puberty? If you took it as a kid, you're messed up? No. And yet it's very easy to replace it with some of the healthier alternatives that are out there. So I think that one can have a thoughtfulness about this stuff, and it's action oriented without having to really freak out about it.
Maintaining balanced hormone levels is vital for understanding optimal functionality in our bodies. Low testosterone levels can lead to a decline in libido, fatigue, reduced muscle mass, irritability, decreased confidence, and even depression. Recognizing the effects of low testosterone emphasizes the importance of addressing hormonal imbalances and seeking appropriate treatment. Understanding the significance of balanced hormones highlights the need to prioritize our physical, mental, and emotional health.
Derek's not a scientist by training, but he's done an immense service to the world because no one was talking about this stuff. It was talked about in bodybuilding circles where they talk very openly. It was starting to emerge in testosterone replacement therapy clinics, and then mostly guys were doing this stuff and lying about it, right? They're doing it, but then they don't want to talk about it. Actually, kudos to Joe Rogan, who years ago came out and said, yeah, he decided to start doing TRT and low dose of testosterone. He's already successfully reproduced, and so he brought it up, and it's clear that This is becoming more common. Here are some of the general principles that I think, forgive me, Derek, if I get this wrong in terms of what you believe, because I never want to speak for anybody else, but my read of the science and the actual protocols speak to the idea that many people do not need testosterone replacement. Young guys should really avoid doing anabolic steroids. It can really mess up their system, not just physically, not just for the ability to have kids later, but lead to all sorts of sexual issues and sexual performance issues. Like, there needs to be some medical incentive. But at the point where someone either has banked sperm or decides they don't want any more kids, or is willing to do something like take HCG to maintain testicular and function and spermatogenesis, it's very clear that going with the lowest, doctor described, right? I'm not talking about illicit use. The lowest possible dosage of testosterone therapy is going to be better than, for instance, taking 200 milligrams in a 1 ml injection every 2 weeks, right? Because you get these huge increases and then these troughs. So people
Is this something that you've learned from Derek?
Yes, and in talking with other people. And I'm no longer doing this, but I did a run of it from 45 to 46 years old, and nothing before that. And I did it because I'm working on a book really that has a whole section on hormone therapies. And I wanted to see what it was like. I'll tell you, basically testosterone gives you more energy to work more, if it's done appropriately. And I'll say when I went into it, my levels were mid-range. They were fine, high to mid-range. They were kind of like 7s, 8s, but I was doing some supplementation to support that. I've since gone back to that. It was funny, when you say something on the internet, people think that means it's forever, right? It is possible to start and come off, right? So what I've done. And so here's what's relevant here. People are now spacing out, 30 milligrams on Monday, 30 milligrams on Wednesday, 30 milligrams on Friday is like kind of a low reasonable dose. Again, talk to your doctor. These aren't recommended dosages. That's more typical. Another thing that's really important is that people have traditionally blocked estrogen by increases while doing this by taking an aromatase inhibitor, Nolvadex, Arimidex, these kinds of things. That almost often is a bad idea, almost often, because having enough estrogen around allows you to maintain cognitive function and libido. A lot of guys think it's just, and it is true, if estrogen is very high and testosterone is very low, libido can suffer. But if testosterone is very high and estrogen is very low, libido can really suffer. So a lot of people who are crushing their estrogen realize that by coming off some of those drugs, they feel far better. Far better. So most people I know that are doing this are taking low doses of testosterone semi-frequently throughout the week, 20 to 30 milligrams every other day or so. There's a lot of variation around this. And then not doing anything to reduce aromatase, or if they are, taking very low doses, not 1 milligram of Arimidex, but maybe something like 0.1 milligrams of Arimidex every third day or so. Again, not a recommendation. Talk to your doctor. The smarter clinics are starting to think about this. And actually, I don't have any financial relationship to Derek or to Merrick Health, which is his clinic, but from what I understand, they do a very good job. So estrogen can help maintain libido, also can increase libido. Now, here's something I learned that's really interesting from Peter Attia recently. Women, as we know, make both testosterone and estrogen, and of course a bunch of other hormones too. If they get their blood work back and you were to adjust the units that those hormones are measured in, nanograms per deciliter in some cases, picograms per deciliter in other cases, if you normalize them all to the same nanograms per deciliter, you would find that a healthy woman has more testosterone than she does estrogen. That does not mean that their testosterone levels are higher than that of men. But this is remarkable, right? This means that these androgens, testosterone, and are doing interesting things in men and in women, and estrogen, as we just described, is doing really interesting things, certainly in women and in men. So this idea of more testosterone, less estrogen good is always the case. That's simply false.
When it becomes a global planetary threat that's a crisis, then it's a justification for virtually any political action.
Peterson, a renowned clinical psychologist and professor, emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility, particularly during these turbulent times. Through his keen interest in psychoanalytic and Jungian perspectives, he underscores how our response to societal changes shape our collective future. His insights remind us of the profound impact of our individual and collective choices, particularly in the face of a value system collapse. But this is only a starting point. Peterson's teaching hold a wealth of wisdom that can guide us through these challenging times.
one of the things that's happened to us, is happening to us, is the political has collapsed into the religious. So there's this New Testament statement that Christ makes. It's an unbelievably impactful statement. It's a statement that is in some sense miraculous in its effects. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And you know, the entire formal separation of church and state in the Western world is a consequence of that statement. You just think of that, how impactful that statement was. That's literally the case. I don't care if you're religious or not. It's irrelevant. Historically, that's the case. That statement did that. So that's a miracle, you know, in some real sense.
In this video, Peterson underscores the significance of adaptability in the face of drastic societal shifts. He explores the need for flexibility and resilience when navigating through the periods of upheaval that we do sometimes, particularly when the profane threatens the sacred. His insights emphasize our collective need to adapt to preserve our moral landscape. However, this is just one piece of the larger picture. Peterson's teaching offers a host of other insights, each offering a unique perspective on navigating societal uncertainties.
Well, let's say that's true psychologically as far as I'm concerned, as well as politically, is that there's a domain that's sacred and there's a domain that's profane. And that's true psychologically. And if you don't keep those separate, then the sacred contaminates the profane. Or alternatively, the profane gets inflated into the sacred. And that's a catastrophe. Because then everything becomes emotionally overwrought. Because you're no longer a political enemy, you're an emissary of Satan. I mean, that's essentially what happened to me with the Red Skull, you know. It got pushed that far. It was right to the point of ultimate absurdity. It's like, really? Like Nazi isn't a bad enough epithet? I have to be a magical super Nazi? And really? That's really necessary? Well, what's going on? Well, obviously, because Red Skull, you think of that, Red Skull is Satan for all intents and purposes. It's only a matter of nomenclature, and so it's not like the Marvel universe is Christian, but it is in a profound sense. I mean, all those movies have underlying religious themes, fighting off the demonic extraterrestrial aliens that are invading the earth. It's all played out in the domain of religious ideation. I mean, Thor is a god, for God's sake. It's not like this is hard to see. Well, if the profane becomes inflated with the sacred, then you demonize your enemies, you know, and then maybe you sacralize yourself as well, and that's not so good. You know, you're an environmentalist. It's like, well, are you sure you're not the Messiah? Are you sure that's not what you're doing? You're the savior of the planet. It's like, are you sure that's so good for your ego? And it's not. It's not. You know, the Earth has to orbit the sun in Jung's terminology, or if it falls into the sun, it's a catastrophe. And all sorts of discussions we're having are becoming inflated with religious concerns. And then, you know, on the materialist atheist side, let's say the scientific side, although it's not really that, there's this insistence that religion is nothing but a set of mistaken scientific propositions about the nature of reality, which it's certainly, that's not a very sophisticated analysis. And I've seen this sort of thing start to happen to people like Richard Dawkins. I mean, he's fallen prey. He's become victim to the collapse of the religious into the political. It's not good. And this has nothing to do with arguments about, you know, do I believe in God or does God exist? It's like, that's not the point of this. That's not the point. That's not the issue here. The issue is we have a religious instinct. And then the question is why? And then the question is, well, what happens when it's not nourished? Where does it go? What does it do? Well, the rationalist idea is, well, if we get rid of all that superstitious claptrap, we'll just be like straight rationalist materialists and the world will move in a positive direction. It's like, no, wrong, too simple. That isn't, where do we get our values? And that's the conversation I'm trying to have with people. That's a big part of it is, look, science does not provide values. We need values or nihilism or reigns. And you want that? No. So where do we get our values? And if there are values, are some values higher than others? And if so, what are the highest values? And what are they opposed to? And how do we embody them? These aren't conversations for children. This is serious stuff, and it's underneath all this noise and terror that we see playing out so destructively. So you see what that does to your soul. You're on Twitter. You get tangled up in these political arguments. It just hurts you. It's not good for you.
Peterson discusses the opportunity for introspection and growth during challenging societal shifts. His perspective encourages us to view these times as a mirror for collective introspection and societal development. His insights urge us to use these challenging times as catalysts for societal growth and transformation. However, this is just the beginning. I keep saying it. Peterson's teaching extend far beyond the concept, offering much more to learn and apply that can significantly influence our approach to societal development.
I worked on a UN committee, it's got to be 10 years ago now, to help draft the UN Secretary General's report on sustainable economic development. And so I looked at all sorts of things like that. I was very curious, for example, about, because people have been beating the overpopulation drum since, well, it really kicked in the 1960s, because there were dire predictions. By the year 2000, the Club of Rome came out and said, well, there'll be riots and mass starvation and mass movement of migrants and all the things you hear about climate change because there's too many people on the planet. And that just didn't happen at all. That was just that. It wasn't just wrong, it was anti-true. It was absolutely wrong. What happened instead was that everyone got way richer, and the bottom section of the population in terms of economic distribution got lifted out of poverty. Inequality still exists, but that's that power law phenomenon we already talked about. Not that that's trivial, it's just unbelievably difficult to determine what to do with. There are solutions, but certainly getting rid of capitalism isn't the solution. And so I looked at population trends and first of all found, not that this is an act of genius or anything, that as soon as you educate women, the size of family shrinks precipitously, like below replacement. And that's partly because women have other options. I mean, all the countries in the West are way below replacement. Korea is way below replacement. South Korea, Japan, way below replacement. Yeah, I think Nigeria will have more people in it than China by the end of the century. So, yeah. And Musk, he's a far-looking man, and so he's looking around the apocalyptic corner, let's say, and like, we're running out of people. And what that means, of course, is that you run out of young people, right? You don't run out of old people first, because everyone who is here now is going to be 30 years older in 30 years, and it'll be young people we don't have enough of, and of course, young people are the ones who do the innovation and are going to do most of the heavy lifting, etc. And so there's going to be a terrible shortage of young people.
Peterson emphasizes the importance of maintaining hope and optimism during these challenging times. Despite being embroiled in numerous controversies, his insights highlight the power of a positive mindset in overcoming adversity and moving forward. He urges us to stay hopeful and to look forward to better days, even when society is going through major difficulties. However, this is just a glimpse into Peterson's vast wisdom. His teachings are filled with valuable guidance on resilience, perseverance, and societal development. Each insight offers a fresh perspective on how to navigate societal challenges with courage and optimism.
Yeah, well, and this idea that the planet has too many people on it, there's no sentiment more implicitly genocidal than that statement. So what do you mean too many people? Exactly. And what do you mean the planet? And what do you propose to do about that exactly? Mass abortion, is that your answer? Or should we do something a little more dramatic? Maybe we'll just shame people out of having children. And I've seen people do that, literally. I saw a professor talking to a couple hundred students, and one of the professors who was an environmentalist activist type, and he got up on stage and shook his finger to the whole young crowd saying that him and his wife had only decided to have one child, which was, in my opinion, one child too many for him. And told all the young people there if they had a shred of ethical decency that they would severely limit their reproductive potential. And I stood up and said that I thought that was one of the most appalling things I'd ever heard anyone in academia say to young people, which is really saying something, because they say plenty of appalling things. And it was a very uncomfortable moment, and he huffed off the stage. But, in a frenzy, talking about how you couldn't talk about such things without being pilloried on ethical grounds. And yeah, that's for sure. You come out as a emissary of the academic establishment, you tell young people that humanity is so corrupt that they should seriously consider not propagating because that violates the deepest of ethical norms, and you think that's a good thing and that that's your right. And it was just beyond comprehension. It's beyond comprehension, but it's associated with like a deeply rooted existential self-hatred. Yeah, well, we're a cancer on the planet, unchecked growth, just like a cancer. It's like, that's us, a cancer. It's okay. We know where your heart is located. Because what's the implications for a doctrine like that? What do you do with a cancer?
Cut it out.
Yeah, that's for sure. Poison it or whatever. There's nothing you don't do to a cancer. So you're going to use a metaphor like that? There's too many people on the planet. You're going to use a metaphor like that? And then you're going to also decide that you're virtuous while you're using it because you're on the side of the planet, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, it's unbelievable. And a huge part of it's rooted in this existential shame and horror at the condition of being human and the fact that life is rife with suffering and a lot of it's unjustified. And, it's a Mephistophelian position. So Mephistopheles was portrayed in Goethe's Faust. That's the story of a man who sold his soul to the devil for knowledge. It's a story of intellectual pride, and Goethe stands in relationship to German literature in the same manner that Shakespeare stands in relationship to English literature. And Goethe's Mephistopheles says straight out twice in the play, once in the first, there's 2 books, and once in the first book and once in the second. Goethe has him restate it twice. Existence is such a foul thing because of all its suffering, essentially, that it would be better if it was merely annihilated. And that's the Mephistophelian stance. This whole show should just come to a halt. Look at how corrupt people are. Evil reigns everywhere. It's nothing but will to power. We're destroying the planet with our unchecked ambition, all of it rooted in greed and Machiavellianism and jockeying for position. And we're so contemptible that we should just roll up and die. And we should shame women into not having children. And we should shame men so they never manifest any planet-destroying ambition. And it's unbelievably appalling. It goes all the way down to the bottom of things. That's what's tearing our culture apart, this dispute about the nature of existence at the most fundamental level.